Now, here's the deal. We know that Yesh Me'ayin has to be in Kecha Atzmus. Atzmus is called Yesh Me'ayin. There's a Hishtashalus. And because there's a Hishtashalus, in the Gili of Hishtashalus, Atzmus is separate. Right? So how in the Gili of Hishtashalus does Yesh Me'ayin take place at the end of Hishtashalus if Atzmus is separate? And the answer is Oyed. Oy Mein Amoyer. What's the Chiddush of Adavar? Chiddush of it is as follows. Oy Mein Amoyer means a light's a perfect reflection of the source. If a light is a perfect reflection of the source, that means that the light is totally bottled to the source. If the light is totally bottled to the source, there is nothing more antithetical, there's nothing more opposite to Yeshus than Oyed. Correct? So how could Oyed, that the whole Metzias is bittul, it's called in Chassidus Ayin, carry Yeshus? And the answer is Mitzad Ein Mein Amoyer. Oyed carries Yeshus, but it's hidden. So if you meet Oyed Ein Sof, you won't see any Yeshus. If okay, to see bittul. But the Oyed carries the Yeshus, and when the time comes, the Yeshus manifests. B'meile, Oyed by itself cannot create Yesh Me'ayin. It needs help. Since Oyed Mein Amoyer, and Oyed is bottled to the Yebish, and the whole principle of Yesh Me'ayin has to be a Metzias, it needs help. What's the help? Kalim. Right, the last words of yesterday's Shir were, B'frat, Ayedei, Hislapshusan, actually the lines before, right? The Kalim of Atzilus, and I indicated what I believe is true, although I'm not 100% sure. This goes on the Chitzeni is the Kalim of Atzilus, that in the aspect of Yesh Me'ayin, they're Iva Gamay Echad, the in Sof, or B'frat, they Hislapshusan Babiyah. The point is that when you combine the Oyed Mein Amoyer quality with the Havdalah and the Hafrada of Kalim, it's able to create Yesh Me'ayin. But Oyed by itself cannot create Yesh Me'ayin. With the help of Kalim it does. You understand? So the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, Omna Mudazes. However, you have to know, in addition to the point that I mentioned in the end of yesterday's Shir, that to create Yesh Me'ayin you have to have a combination of Oyed and Kalim, and that is the primary basis for the creation of Yeshus, and something which is absolutely separate from Malchus Datzilus. It's from Malchus. Because Malchus of Atzilus, Shenasa Atik Debri, it becomes the Atik, the Keser of the next world, the world of Bria. And the reason is, Ki Melach Pole'am B'chuli. Stop. Because there's no king without a nation, etc. Stop. That's a point. It's at end. What's the Alter Rebbe just saying in these few words? The nature of Melucha is Havdalah. The nature of a king is that he has to have people over whom to rule who are far from him. If they're close to him, it's a chesaron. Children cannot be a'am, they have to be dafka removed. The nature of Malchus is to operate min arichok. There's a sugi in Chasidus which is spoken about by Arichas and Hemshach Tafish Samach Tes, which is called Oyed, Shem, and Koyach. Oyed is the lowest Indian. Shem is higher. Oyed, Shem, and Malchus. Oyed is the lowest Indian. Shem is higher. Malchus is even higher. And the way it works is Oyed reveals the more the most. Shem reveals the more the second to the most. And Malchus, which has the highest Sheiresh and Atzmus, comes in a way of Havdalah. The nature of Malchus, the Midah of Malucha, is that it operates in a way of separateness. So this idea that you combine Oyed Mein Hamoyer and the Yeshus, which is Nei Mein Hamoyer, with something else to affect the creation of Yesh Me'ayin, says the Rebbe, it's not so much the etzemiyim from Kalim, but it's thinking from Malchus. Because the nature of Malchus is that it's separate from Malakus. The nature of Malchus is separate from the Vrayim. And this koyach that Malchus has for separateness comes from Atzmos Mamish. And dafka, when you combine Ein Sof with Malchus and its nature of being separate from this that it rules over, does it create Yesh Me'ayin? You understand? And he explains. Moreover, another point is that the Riboy HaNevroyim Ve'es Chalkusa, the various creations and the division, the separateness, the disparateness between them. In other words, in Alakus everything is one. In Mitzias everything is Yesh, separate from the Eibishter. But in addition to everything being Yesh, separate from the Eibishter, it's also separate from every other component of its own world. What's the Hebrew for that? Hischalkus, right? Let's make Hischalkus. Page 260. The key word is Hischalkus. It creates divisions. It says the Rebbe, just like Malchus creates Yeshus because of his tendency of being removed from the Am, Malchus creates Hischalkus. In the world itself, there's disparateness. There's a lot of different aspects. Okay, although they're created from Ein Sof, which is Yachad and Yuchad B'Tachlis, It's absolutely one. It's one with itself. It's one with itself. Still, Malchus, in addition to the Havdalah quality that it brings to the table to affect creating Yeshus, there's also the Hischalkus quality. It has the multitude of letters, which comes from Malchus, which is called Pi Hashem, from the mouth of the Eibishter, or Baruch Piv Kol Tzavam, and with the air of Hashem's mouth, all the hosts are created. In other words, all the riboy in Nivrayim has to do with Malchus. What's the concept of the 5 sources of speech? Lagabi Maila, Lagabi the Eibishter, Dr. Hein Behei Gevurah, the Nuk comes from the 5 strengths of Malchus. So for these 2 reasons, since Malchus creates in a way of Havdalah and Helem, and Malchus creates in a way of Helem, so when you combine these 2 points, when you combine these 2 points, you have Yesh Me'ayin. And therefore, Nikras Alma Des Galia, Malchus is called the revealed world. Now, Malchus is not revealed. Malchus is Atzilus. The revealed world means the lower world, right? What's on with Des Galia? The world that we see. What's on with this Kassia? The world that we cannot see. Malchus we cannot see. But because Malchus affects that there should be a world which we could see, Malchus is called the world of revelation. Okay, kibah, because through her, nigla ekech Ein Sof, is it revealed the power that Ein Sof live yesh miyayin to create things that should appear and experience themselves as being independent and separate. Shalei al yadei ilo yalom, not in a way which is called cause and effect, closeness. Zakter Aval, however, Tes Sfiras and Ishenas did 9 higher Sfiras. That means to say what's higher than Malchus. Netzlu, they were emanated, they were shined. Bishtar, through a chain reaction of cause and effect, in such a fashion that you can always trace it back. In other words, you look at Chesed, you know Bina. You look at Gvura, you know Chesed. You look at the Feres, you know Gvura. So therefore, the first 9 Sfiras cannot be the Sfiras that are affecting the creation of Yesh Me'ayin because they're close, as opposed to Malchus.
So what you're saying is that you're saying that the way Malchus creates the next world is that we see Yesh Me'ayin?
Right. And the reason for it is because of Malchus' tendency to make things which are separate.
What was our original question?
Who said the real question was, how can something be Iva Gamei Echad if it's Mugbul?
Right, so we said that...
it's only Iva Gamei Echad Lagabe Hisavas, not B'yetz.
Really, it's Yesh, it's also Yesh.
Not Yesh, it's just not Iva Gamei Echad. In Atzilus you have Nevroim which are Lakus that are Yotzav and Yifridu. Right? Says the Rebbe, Ve'eira in Sof HaMalubush B'chochma Levadeh. I got to tell you this, Alter Rebbe, that this Eira in Sof really goes only into Chochma. In other words, the idea of Eir Mein Amoy, which has to do with Yeshus, is only in Chochma. Somehow it gets to Malchus. How? So the Alter Rebbe says, Ve'zeu Shekosov, the idea here is the pasuk says in the statement, No'utz, Tchilas of Sefer Yetzirah. No'utz, Tchilas and B'seifan, there's a planting, there's a connection between the lowest level and the highest level. Ki kesed. In other words, since Chochmah is the highest level, and in Chochmah you have Ein Sof, and Malchus, the lowest level, is planted in the highest level, Malchus has the power of creating Yesh Me'ayin. Ki kesed, and Mamutza ben HaMaitzel Etzol. Kesed is an intermediate between godliness and the creations. And V'yesh, but B'chiras HaCheres Shel Ein Sof, Kesed has the lowest level of the Ein Sof. But L'chei Nikra Kesed Malchus, which is why Kesed is also called Malchus. Kesed, which means crown, that has in it the Ein Sof, is also called Malchus. Only a king has a crown. V'gam, in addition, the lowest level of Ein Sof, he Malchus the Ein Sof, is the level of Malchus the Ein Sof. For this reason, Malchus the Atzilus, also Malchus of Atzilus, Nasa Keser Mimata Lamaila becomes a Keser from the bottom up to create the worlds of Bria Tzir Nasir. What did Alter Rebbe just say in these few lines? Ein Sof is only in Chochmah, or more precisely, Ein Sof is only in Kesed. But there's a connection between the highest level and the lowest level, and because of the connection between the highest level and the lowest level, this quality of Ein Sof, which exists in Kesed or exists in Chochmah, comes down directly into Malchus to create Yesh Me'ayin. So this is what he says. Kesed, Malchus, because of its tendency for Havdalah and its tendency for Hischalkus, combines with Ein Sof because of the principle of Noach Chelas and B'Seifan to create Yesh Me'ayin. And the lower worlds are created through the Ein Sof with the help of Malchus. And then he says V'gam. V'gam also. V'lachein, and therefore. I'm sorry, I made a mistake again. Umagam, moreover. Kebrias HaNeshamas Mimena, the creation of Neshamas. And I suppose that here he means Neshamas even in Atzilus. From her, from Malchus. Liyesh yesh v'dava nifa b'fnei atzma be'elam abriya. To be a yesh and a thing unto itself in elam abriya. V'nikra b'shem leida, it's called birth. Kikriyas Yamsuf, like the idea of Kriyas Yamsuf. The Batika Talia, which is connected to Atik. He says, Malchus of Atzilus creates Neshamas and Bria, like Kriyas Yamsuf. What happened by Kriyas Yamsuf? By Kriyas Yamsuf, the Batika Talia Mil. So the Koyach to split the sea came from Keser. Similarly, the Koyach to create Neshamas comes from Keser. For God, moreover, Kol Gidal Neshamas, all the growth of the Neshamas, Kol Zayin Chadoshim, all the 7 months. Mizivik Sheshmini Atzeres at Shvi'ish al Pesach, from the time of the Ibur, which is Shvi'ish al Pesach, Shmini Atzeres, the time that they're born at Shvi'ish al Pesach, who K'may Gidal Zun bebetet Eimei Law would compare to the birth, to the development of Midas and Malchus of Atzilus and Bina, Bet and Eimei Law and Bina of Atzilus, Shu'ai De Eidos Ayeda, which are through higher lights, Me'emei law from Emei law, L'mayla, and higher and even higher, Adein Sof, higher and even higher, Hamislavish, which is revealed in it, Kol Tesa Zayin Yarchei Leida, all the 9 of the 7 months of birth. That means to say like this. Just like the creation of Elam Abriya is a combination of Ein Sof with Malchus, the creation of Neshamas in Elam Abriya is also a combination of Ein Sof and Malchus. Then there's Neshamas in Atzilus. The Neshamas in Atzilus are not created from Malchus, they're created from Bina. The principle is the same. Bina would be like Malchus, we have a Malchus-like quality, and in Bina there would be a Gili which is very, very high, and the combination of this high Gili with Bina would create the Neshama. In other words, to create Yesh Me'ayin, you have to have 2 aspects. One is infinite light, which comes down to the lowest level because of the principle of Nazchas and Seifan, and this Malchus quality, which is separate and divides. He says 2 inyanim of birth of Neshamas. I have to make a correction. He says 2 inyanim of the birth of Neshamas. The first idea he says about the birth of Neshamas is that you combine Ein Sof with Malchus, create Neshamas and Bria. The second idea of birth of Neshamas is that you have to create a combination of Ein Sof and Bina to create birth of Neshamas and Atzilus. So the Rebbe, in the footnote, in the Tanya, he says like this, that every Neshama is born twice. First, it has to go through a spiritual process of being developed, and then it has to have a process of coming down into the guf. This is called Ibur, the pregnancy of a Neshama. Neshamas are conceived, they become pregnant, they begin on Shmini Atzeres, and they're born on Shvi'ish al Pesach. This takes place in Atzilus. Once they're born in Atzilus, they have to come to Bia and go through another process in order to become into a guf. In both cases, the argument is, both in the creation of the Neshama in Bria, as well as the creation of the Neshama in Atzilus, the Oir, Ein Sof, combines with Malchus or with Bina to create Yesh Me'ayin. And the Rebbe says, V'kacha, similarly, hu bebrias neshamas malach al bria, just like in Atzilus itself, it's a combination of Ein Sof with a lower level, which is a Malchus quality, to create. The same is true in Bria, to create neshamas and malachim. That has to go through these steps. V'gam, moreover, called ikir v'sheiresh atipa, the core and root of the point of the seed, shemekabelas u'mizaberes mizah, which Malchus gets and is impregnated with from Ze'er Ampin, whom Mechen Dava comes from Chochmo Bina, or B'chol Zuvik, and anytime there's a Zuvik, Nimshechas Lava Me'arech V'atik, Me'arech Ampin V'atik, it's Mamshech from higher and even higher from Keser, and Pnimis HaKeser, or M'mayla Adin Tzaf, higher and even higher without an end, Rak Shahakal Be'hel and B'mechen, it's all hidden in the Mayach, At Leides HaNukva, until the feminine is born, HaNeshamas V'malachim V'yicholos Leilam Abriya. Basically, he's saying that the Ein Sof is responsible for the creating of Yesh Me'ayin. And even though we say that the mashpia of Neshama Yisrael comes from Zah, with only midas of Atzilus, the real Shadish is higher and even higher till Ein Sof, and it's this combination which creates Yesh Me'ayin. Nimtza, so the Rebbe concludes, Shazel Gili Ein Sof Mamesh Adehi B'Valei. When a Neshama is conceived and is born, it's born through the help of Malchus, the Makabel, which adds to it the quality of Helam and Havdalah, but the Shadish is Ein Sof, which creates the Yeshus.